Good afternoon. Happy 4th. My name is Kellyanne Boyce, and I am president of the Chautauqua Women's Club. This is our first Contemporary Issues Forum lecture, or CIF for short, of the season. So thank you for coming. Thank you for coming out in this very busy day, this hot day, and I'm giving you all a warm and loving welcome. Before we begin, I do have many thank yous. Thank you to Hope and Jake DeGari for their technical expertise this summer. Jake back there has agreed to be our videographer. Thank you to our usher, Jean Hansen. Thank you, Jean. She'll be with us every Saturday. Thank you to Deb Treps for her outstanding reporting of our speakers in the Chautauqua Daily. Where's Deb? I thought I saw her. Thank you. And we are incredibly thankful to our 2026 program sponsors who generously support our programming. They are Anonymous, Chrissy Fulton and George Vector, Lauren Rich Fine of Beatrice Advisors, Susan O'Connor Baird, the McGee Women's Research Institute and the Hammond Foundation, and of course the Rita Arjun Auerbach Program Scholarship, lovingly gifted by Kathy Bonner, Mary Lou Goodman, and Josette Robert. So our donors help us bring this thought-provoking and world-class speakers to the stage. So thank you very much. Next week's program brings a National Book Award finalist, Deborah Heiligman. She'll be speaking about her acclaimed new book, Loudmouth, Emma Goldman versus America, a love story. It promises to be a very powerful and engaging conversation, and we hope you'll join us here at 3 o'clock next Saturday. Today, as we gather to celebrate our nation's independence and America's 250th anniversary, I would like to pause for a few minutes to honor the men and women of our armed forces, those who have served, those who serve today, and especially those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Their courage, their commitment make it possible for us to gather today freely, learn, reflect, and celebrate our country. So we are deeply grateful, and for the veterans in the audience, I say thank you for your service. For 137 years, the Women's Club has brought people together who believe in curiosity, lifelong learning, and community. So why do we exist? We exist to inspire, empower the women and the men who love women. Men, you say? Yes, we have over 100 members, and we are grateful to all our members. So thank you for all of your support. This year, we celebrate a remarkable milestone. We have hit the $2 million mark for our scholarship giving to the Chautauqua Institution. Each scholarship represents belief in a young person's future, and thank you all who support our scholarship program. $2 million is a lot of money. Thank you. To find out more about becoming a member, or you can sign up for our many activities, please check out our website, chautauquawomensclub.org. Now for a few logistics. Today's talk will be about 35-40 minutes or so, followed by approximately 15 minutes of Q&A. There are 2 microphones in the front here to ask your questions. Please keep them concise and no Chautauqua prelude. I love saying that over here. If you do not wish to be recorded, please refrain from asking a question, and please speak into the microphone when you ask your question. Our speaker today is the esteemed Dennis Wilder. Last summer, Dennis captivated us with an unforgettable program marking the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. We knew then we had to invite him back. Today's lecture, Washington Spies, Espionage in the Revolutionary War, couldn't be more fitting for this 4th of July. Dennis brings a perspective very few people can offer. He served as a special assistant to the president and Senior Director for East Asia on the National Security Council, and later became Senior Editor of the President's Daily Brief, and then served as the CIA's Deputy Assistant Director for East Asia and the Pacific. Today, he teaches at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, where he continues to prepare the next generation of national security leaders. This year, Dennis was awarded the Order of the Rising Sun, which is the most prestigious award given to a non-Japanese, which is amazing. But actually, what caught my attention wasn't just today's fascinating topic. This morning's Chautauqua Daily included a wonderful article that I hope you all read about Dennis. Buried in the article was what had been maybe my favorite line. When asked about his teaching, he casually mentioned that his favorite lecture is The Future of Warfare. Well, Dennis, I think you have accidentally programmed next year's CIF lecture. I want to hear about that. But for today, we're traveling back to our nation's founding, where we'll discover how intelligence, espionage, and a remarkable young commander named George Washington helped shape the birth of America. Dennis is a longtime Chautauquan, and he was joined here by his wife, Ursula, also a distinguished former CIA leader, their son, Peter, and Maya, and they're engaged, and his fiancée. So welcome, and thank you for sharing your July 4th with us. Ursula has generously provided the Women's Club with a few highly valuable CIA publications. So today, we're going to have a complimentary raffle opportunity following this lecture for a copy of a book called CIA at War. It's a photographic essay that tells a story of CIA officers in war. It contains portraits of CIA men and women, as well as still life photographs of historical artifacts. The story begins in World War II and continues through the present. And this book is dedicated to the families of the CIA officers, past and present. And it goes to their families, right? Thank you. There are 2 chances to win, so before you leave today, stop at the check-in and just get the QR code and simply enter your name, email address, and phone number for your chance to win, and we'll notify you by July 6th. So thank you, Ursula. But please join me in giving a warm Chautauqua welcome to Dennis Wilder.
Well, many thanks to Kelly and the CWC for this opportunity. I really can't think of any greater honor than to speak of the father of our nation on the 4th of July. Louder, okay, I hear you. Today, of course, we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of a grand experiment. It is an ongoing experiment. Abe Lincoln charged us with the task of trying to create a more perfect union. Martin Luther King added to this by hoping that one day, quote, we shall bring into full realization the dream of the American democracy, a dream yet unfulfilled. But my job today is not to talk about the challenges of today, but about the extraordinary men and women who founded this great country on an ideal, a hope, and a prayer. Without George Washington, our ideal of government of the people, by the people, for the people, may never have become a reality. But we must remember that our founders needed all the help they could get from the divine because they were rebelling against the most powerful nation on earth. The realm of King George III extended from North America to the Caribbean, to Africa, India, and the Pacific. And it was said at that time that the sun never set on the British Empire. But before I begin, I need to be clear that I am not a historian, and I guarantee you that there are people in this audience who know far more about General George Washington than I do. But my wife and I do know a great deal about another subject, which is espionage. We are spies by trade and training. I served at the CIA for 36 years. My wife served there for 28 years, traveling around the globe to practice our chosen profession, sometimes in combat zones. We used various covers for action, identities, while on these operational missions, and took training to detect surveillance and to protect ourselves. One of my favorite courses that we teach at our training center called The Farm is Crash and Bang, where you learn to go through roadblocks and other things in an automobile. We've met in hotel rooms and safe houses with brave men and women in all parts of the globe who agreed to spy for the United States of America. Each of us had code names, selected randomly from the New York phone book, that we were never allowed to reveal, and in fact, we must carry those to our grave. Let's today begin, though, by looking at the picture of General George Washington. This is not the George Washington you're used to seeing on your dollar bill. How old was he when he took command of the Continental Army? 43. How old was Thomas Jefferson when he wrote the Declaration of Independence? 33. Now, my son is a great guy, but I'm not sure he can write the Declaration of Independence. Two of his generals, Nathaniel Greene and Henry Knox, anybody know their ages? Greene was 33, and Knox was only 25. Greene knew nothing about military except what he had read in books. In fact, he was a Quaker, and he walked with a limp. Knox was all of 25 years of age. He was the head of Washington's artillery forces and a bookseller before the war. He was overweight and out of shape, and both of them had the equivalent of 5th grade educations. And in fact, Washington himself was very poorly educated and very conscious of that fact around the Yale and Harvard men, who were many of the founding fathers. Now, let's understand what we're talking about when we're looking at spying in the Revolutionary Age. Today, we have a wide variety of technological tools we use in the 17 organizations that comprise the American intelligence community. We have imagery intelligence, what we call IMINT, that comes from satellites continuously moving overhead, providing us pictures of any part of the world we want. When I was head of analysis on East Asia, I picked the spot on the globe I wanted, and within hours, I had pictures. Many pictures, different kinds of pictures, spectral pictures, all kinds of things. We have signal intelligence, what we call SIGINT, that is swept up by the National Security Agency from all forms of communication, including cyber. We have MASINT. We measure signals and signatures that focus on detecting, tracking, and identifying targets by analyzing their physical characteristics or signatures. Think, for example, of the heat signature of a ballistic missile in flight. We have open source intelligence, what we call OSINT, that focuses on collecting and analyzing speeches, public pronouncements, propaganda, and social media transmissions of the foreign government. I had huge tools at my disposal when I wrote the President's Daily Briefing book. I had 20,000 analysts working on that book. I had all of these sources of information. George Washington had none of those capabilities. What he had is what we label human intelligence, or spies. The tradecraft of spying is what we will concentrate on today, and I hope to show you the fundamentals really haven't changed much over time. Let me try a simple thought experiment to explain human intelligence collection. Let's say hypothetically, I'm saying hypothetically, you arrived at Chautauqua 2 weeks ago to find that your favorite restaurant had closed down and there was a for sale sign in front of it. You ask your friends what happened and everyone shared very dubious rumors about what had happened. Nothing was verifiable. Nothing seemed to be the truth. So where would you go to try and get that information? No. Google's not going to tell you a thing about what happened down the road. Where else? The what? The owner. But the owner has disappeared. I couldn't find a number for the owner. Okay. Maybe you go down to the VFW post, buy a guy a beer at the counter. The only trouble with buying a guy a beer at the counter, which I have done on many occasions in my career, is that they tend to elaborate so you'll buy them more beers. So if I were using that kind of information in a report to the president, I'd call this an untested source with unknown reliability and unproven access. That is the lowest form of human intelligence. Now maybe you go to Lighthouse Point and try to talk to the owner. He certainly is more reliable than the guy in the bar, but is he going to talk to a stranger about something sensitive in this town? Particularly in front of other customers? Probably not. But what about talking to a local resident that you have interacted with for several summers? The person has provided you with good inside information on this town, and with whom you have an ongoing relationship of trust. We call this intelligence reports to the president a tested source of high reliability with proven access to the information. But who would that be in Chautauqua? Anybody have any ideas? Earl is not a bad one. And I have used Earl as a source before, by the way, yes. Peter Cohen at the Welcome Center, that's interesting. Yeah? Well, my choice was to look for my local barber, because I've known that person for a while. When I'm in the chair with that person, there's nobody else around, so we can talk confidentially. And then I've heard other people, for example, go up to the training at the fitness center. And while they're on the machines, they slip in the questions to their trainer. This is what intelligence collection is all about. You try and find trusted sources of information. Now, these are not far from the intelligence issues George Washington faced. George had a Continental Army of 2,400 poorly trained farmers, tradesmen, and women. Some of them were my relatives at the start of the war. And the largest size of his army was no more than 16,000 men. The British had 8,000 soldiers at the beginning, but they quickly grew to 50,000 men. Washington understood he desperately needed exquisite real-time intelligence on British troop strength, troop dispositions, combat readiness, intentions, and battle plans. As a young soldier in the French and Indian War, he had actually gone behind French lines for the British. From his very beginning of his command of the Continental Army in 1775, he took direct control of intelligence operations. In fact, he asked the Continental Congress for a secret service fund and dedicated an amazing 10% of his budget to intelligence collection. Interestingly enough, our intelligence budget is about 10% of the Pentagon's budget. Now the Continental Congress, dealt with these issues in something called the Committee of Secret Correspondence. And frankly, today it's similar. We have the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. They have the authority of congressional oversight and budget and call intelligence officers to testify under oath in closed-door sessions in a secure room at the Capitol. I can tell you that some of the most stressful days of my career were spent being grilled by senators on my intelligence analysis and my China operations. I was very glad that these weren't in front of the media. Some of Washington's early attempts at intelligence were successful. For example, you probably remember the famous words of Nathan Hale at the gallows before he was hung by the British. I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country. On September 8, 1776, Nathan Hale volunteered to go behind enemy lines and report on troop movements. He was ferried across Long Island Sound, and he planned to disguise himself as a Dutch schoolteacher looking for work, and carried with him his Yale diploma. However, Hale had no training for this task. He had no cover for action, traveled under his own name, he had no contacts in New York City, and he had no plan for communicating with General Washington. It took the British only 10 days to recognize and arrest him in a tavern. Now, one piece of CIA history and lore that you may be interested in, we have a statue of Nathan Hale because he was the first American spy killed in action standing at the entrance to our headquarters in Langley, Virginia. And it is our tradition that when we go on a dangerous mission, we take a quarter and we put it at the feet of Nathan Hale. Frankly, there have been so many coins collected that we have added much to the Widow's Fund at CIA by this activity. These kinds of insertion operations are extremely dangerous and hazardous. In 1952, CIA officer Jack Downey, another Yalie by the way, was captured by the Chinese while trying to resupply a team of Chinese rebels operating within communist China. Downey was not hung, but he spent the next 21 years in the Chinese prison. It was only in 1973 when President Nixon finally acknowledged to Mao that yes, indeed, he was a CIA officer, that he was released. Downey couldn't believe it when he came home when he found out that he had $170,000 in back pay. And he went on to be a judge on the Connecticut Supreme Court. It is not so inaccurate to joke about the history of CIA and say it was pale, Yale, and Mayo. I sort of fit that description. But it is, since we are here with the Women's Club, because of iconic instigator women like my wife, that this is no longer the CIA of today. So I've told you of a disaster of espionage in George Washington. But the way to really do intelligence operations is agents in place. People that would never be suspected of spying because they are part of the community and have proven loyalty to their government, or so it seems. The most famous of these were the Colbert spy ring that operated from the Long Island town of Secaucus and comprised 20 people. You may have seen an AMC series called Turn that is based on the story of that ring. The ring was set up by Washington's Director of Military Intelligence, Benjamin Talmadge, of the Connecticut Light Dragoons. Talmadge was a native of Secaucus, and so he knew who to recruit in that town that he could absolutely trust. He chose a farmer and reluctant spy named Abraham Woodall to be at the center of this group. Talmadge used very professional spycraft, many of the techniques we use today. He used code names, secret writings, in cipher communication, couriers, dead drops, and discreet signal. When the ring had important information, Anna Strong, a woman who owned a tavern in the town, would put a black petticoat on her clothesline to signal the courier that they had information. She would then hang handkerchiefs, the number of which would correspond to a secret pickup spot. The courier, a boatman who had also grown up in Secaucus, would then meet her or one of the other members of it there. Today, we use innocuous signals and devices all the time to communicate with our agents in high surveillance areas. My personal favorite is our dead rat dead drop. We hollow out a rat and we put money or messages within the cavity, and we then sew the dead rat up, and we put it under a park bench in Moscow or Beijing or wherever. The only problem we have with this is sometimes the cats retrieve it before our agents get there. Nothing's perfect. Washington only knew of these secret agents by 3-digit codes. One woman agent was codenamed 355. In July 1780, she provided the most important information ever provided by the Culper ring. She reported that British General Sir Henry Clinton was about to send forces to Rhode Island to attack newly arrived French troops. Washington immediately drew up a plan for a fictitious attack on New York City. He then had the plans delivered to a British outpost by a local farmer who claimed to have found them on the side of the road. Washington then marched troops toward New York City to further provide evidence that an attack was imminent. General Clinton was spooked and stood down the attack on the French troops. Agent 355 saved the French troops and enabled them to subsequently join the understrength Continental Force. So who was Agent 355? Amazingly, to this day, we don't know. We believe she was from a prominent Tory family, and that she was one of several females around the debonair British officer, Major Andre, who enjoyed the company of young, attractive women. She was discovered by the British and incarcerated on the squalid prison ship Jersey, moored in the New York harbor. She died there. Another spy of note was James Armistead. James was an enslaved person in the service of an ardent American patriot. James volunteered for the Continental Army under French General Lafayette. He convinced the British that he was a runaway slave and became a courier for the British in the camp of General Cornwallis. His espionage was instrumental in the defeat of British forces during the siege of Yorktown. After the war, Virginia gave freedom to all slaves who fought in the war. But James did not qualify. Why? Because he was a spy, not a soldier, and he had never carried a weapon in the war. It took 5 years of petitioning by James to the governor of Virginia before he was set free. Now at this point, let me bring the story of Washington's spies to this part of New York State. The Oneida Nation was the only part of the Algonquin Confederacy who decided to join the colonial side in the conflict. They acted brilliantly for General Washington, providing critical battlefield intelligence. Most famously, in August of 1777, Oneida riders rushed to Fort Schuyler in the Mohawk River Valley to alert American militia of an impending British attack. This intelligence helped prevent a British link-up and contributed mightily to the later American victory at Saratoga. A group of Oneidas traveled from central New York to Valley Forge during that harsh winter and spring of 1777 and 8, carrying life-saving corn to feed Washington's starving troops. They may, in fact, have saved the life of my 5th great-grandfather. Switching gears, I want to mention secret writing. Washington insisted on this for both instructions to his spies and information passed by them. This invisible ink was easy to make. In fact, you can try it yourself. Make a weak solution of starch, tinge it with little iodine. It will create a bluish writing that fades away. Then to expose it, take 5 grams of iodate potassium and mix it with 100 grams of water and 2 grams of tartaric acid. After spreading the mixture on the paper, run a hot iron over the surface. But be careful not to scorch your secret message. Washington spies used concealment devices in case they were searched by British patrols. One of these was a small lead cylinder that could have been swallowed in an emergency. However, the downside was lead poisoning. Consequently, the colonials created what they called the silver bullet container, which would not poison courier. Let me end my remarks by noting that George Washington was a remarkable man of gravitas, intelligence, and integrity. He could have become the King of America. He could have become the Emperor of America. But instead, he stepped down from the role of Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army immediately after the War of Independence and left for his beloved home at Mount Vernon. He had told Martha when he became the commander in 1775 that he would be home by Christmas. Well, he did make it home by Christmas, except it was in December of 1782, 8 years later. He wanted to retire to Mount Vernon and end his public career. But 5 years later, the young nation desperately needed him. After the Revolution, there were 13 very independent states with political leaders unwilling to give power and authority to the central government. Washington was the only man who could pull them together. He was the only man trusted across the 13 colonies, and he calmly and decisively helped write the Constitution of the United States and fostered the concept of the 3 equal branches of government. One of the interesting things is if you look at the Constitution, there's actually very little about the executive branch and presidency in there. And it was because everybody trusted Washington. So why did you have to write rules? Of course, these days we're struggling with some of those questions. But Washington, after 2 terms, after he felt he had stabilized the government, refused a 3rd term and set that example that we today maintain very sensibly. Let me end by saying Washington was not the most intellectual founding father. Jefferson was. Washington was not the wisest founding father. Arguably, that was Benjamin Franklin. Washington was not the greatest orator of the founding fathers. Patrick Henry was. Washington was none of these things. He was simply, in my humble opinion, the greatest American president of all time. Thank you.
Please stand up if you have any questions. We'll go left to right.
Thank you very much. I wanted to fast forward to intelligence today.
Sure.
And wanted to make this a comfortable question. Knowing and talking about the agents in place around the world, what is their challenge when they know that some of our top information has been moved into files out of secure hands and into someone's bathroom? What does that mean for them in the field as far as their safety? And what do we need to extend to them the precautions and safety that they expect?
Good question. The protection of sources is the highest commandment we have in intelligence. These are people that we know if they're found out, they will die. I ran a spy network in China that was wrapped up by the Chinese. 20 people died. And it was a stupid mistake by somebody. It was careless handling of information. And I live with that every single day. So, as a professional intelligence officer, when I read that presidents have kept these things in open places, it is frightful. Because the problem is people really don't understand why we have to do what we have to do. It is too easy for just a little bit of information to give away an agent in place. For example, we don't tell the president who our agents are. We don't tell anybody in the cabinet who our agents are. We use code words for them. In our email traffic, you will never see the name of an agent or the handler of an agent. It is all disguised. And when an agent's life is endangered, we pull them out. You probably meet Americans that you don't even know work for the CIA overseas, and we resettle in the United States. Maybe at your local 7-Eleven where they're owning it. We put them in places in the United States. We make sure their families are taken care of. We have a huge trust factor with agents. So when I see stories like that, or there was a story the other day in the New York Times that the DNI wanted the names of all agents to be put in one place, no. We compartmentalize this completely because people will die. This is a life or death business. And so, yes, it's a real problem when senior government officials don't understand what they're dealing with. They may think it looks innocuous. It isn't. Even the tiniest thing can give away an agent.
Coming back to Revolutionary War times for a moment.
Thank you.
This Talmadge guy,
Yeah.
he was the guy you said had figured out secret codes and everything. I mean, he didn't read Spycraft for Dummies, so did he have any training or background in that, or he just kind of made it up as he went along? The guy who created the secret codes, or do we know much about?
No,
He ended up-
I mean, these were amateurs. There was no such thing as an intelligence service in colonial America. I think they had learned some from the British. The British, of course, and the French and others had espionage long before we did.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of their backgrounds, I mean, this was what was so remarkable about these people.
Yeah.
The fact that they could set up, under the British rule in Secaucus, a facility, a ring of 20 people. And as far as I can know, Agent 355 is the only member of that ring that, was hung. That is really good intelligence operation. And that's why I say Washington and Talmadge and these people, really, I mean, considering their lack of education and background, this was very well done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You can talk to the right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Several years ago, we had a wonderful talk from right here about British forces in the Revolutionary War, pointing out that for the British, their cavalry was the best forces they had. They were the second sons of the best families. They had the best horses, and they were the best fighting troops. They had a problem getting horses to America and getting their cavalry here. And Washington and his espionage team focused on forage and horses and cavalry, and was one of the successes. Now, when we look at countries that are our adversaries, how do we figure out what are their greatest strengths, and how do we go after them?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, intelligence helps you. If you're trying to figure out the strength and weakness of a foreign government, You want spies who can get into the inner circle. These are what we call sometimes platinum spies, the ones that can get you direct access to the top of their system. And spies like that can tell you the strengths and weaknesses, and therefore what we need to work against. A more simple explanation, say we are in a trade negotiation with the Chinese, and the President of the United States asks the CIA, well, what's the trade space here? What are they going to give? What can I get? What can I give that they're going to give me the right things? And so what we try and do is we find agents within the Chinese government who are willing to tell us what their trade negotiators are going to be about. And some of our most successful negotiations in lots of different areas come from that kind of information where you know beforehand. Now remember, they're trying to do the exact same thing to you. Spy versus spy is a constant in the world today. What you do is you try and ascertain those through various means, whether it's SIGINT, HUMINT, VOTINT, whatever it is. And then the President of the United States. And remember, we don't make those decisions, by the way. When I wrote the President's Daily Briefing book for 6 years, I never recommended anything to the President of the United States in terms of policy. What I did was give him tools to make decisions. Our job is not to try and design policy. It is to elevate the discussion in policy circles. And we are very, very careful of that. I know the public doesn't always believe us, but it's true. We are very careful to stay in our lane. And our lane is the collection of information to protect people of the United States and the free world. That's our job.
Yes. My question is, when you talk about spies, whether it's in the American Revolutionary Period or forward, when obtaining information, do spies use romantic relationships or sex to get any sensitive information?
Well, I was delicate about it, but Spy 355 may well have had a relationship with Major Andre. That is a real possibility. Many countries use what is called honeypot. And honeypot is where you entice somebody with a very attractive spy. I'll tell you one story. Every time I went to Beijing in the last few years, when I'd go to my hotel at night, an attractive young woman would get on the elevator with me, and she'd press no buttons. And I'd press the button for my floor, and we'd get to my floor, and we'd look at each other, and she'd say, "Can I come to your room?" In Chinese. And I'd say, "Why in Chinese?" And the conversation ended. But this is a very popular thing in spycraft. Lots of countries do it. We don't really do it, and I'll tell you why. We find blackmail to be a very poor motivator for spies. It gets you a little information, but it doesn't get you a sustained source. So what do we use? Cold hard cash is a very good way. Another way is many people want to come to the United States. So you ask somebody to stay in place for a few years, and then you bring them and their family to the United States. Or they may want to send their kids to American colleges. We help them do that. But you're absolutely right. The honey trap is very common and works very well, unfortunately. Yeah.
If a spy becomes double spy,
Oh yeah.
and you find out, do you keep dealing with them or cut them off or squeeze as much as you can out of them?
This is where spying gets incredibly complicated, because you can have a triple spy. So if you find him out, and then you turn him again, and then they may turn him again. Yeah, there is a lot of that. And of course, one I did not talk about was Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold was a great general of the Continental Army, Washington had huge confidence in Benedict Arnold. But Benedict Arnold did not feel others venerated him enough. He was an incredible egotist. And so he turned sides. And Washington hated him. And at one point said, I don't care how you bring him to me, in what condition you bring him to me, just get that guy. We never did, and he was buried in London with full honors after the war.
Under the current administration, so many people have been fired, and after the recent Supreme Court decision that the executive branch could pretty much fire anybody, I'm wondering what you think about today's climate relative to all the things you've mentioned.
Sure.
in your talk.
Sure. One of the things that we fight against in intelligence is what we call politicization. And this president is not the first one who has politicized intelligence. I've worked for 6 presidents. All of them, in one way or another, wanted me to tell them what they wanted to hear, which is politicization. I was hauled up before committees on Capitol Hill because I wouldn't say what they wanted me to in a different administration about China. I had 32 articles written against me in a certain Washington newspaper because of it. So let's not act as if this is new. This is absolutely not new. And what we do is we train our people, and we train them to tell the truth. Call it as you see it. As George Tenet used to tell me, hit the ball straight down the middle. That is our job. And if we don't do that, shame on us. I don't care who the president is. If a president said to me, you have to do that, absolutely, I'd leave. I will not do that.
Just because so many people have been fired that aren't experts in
No, I'm sorry. I don't agree. That is a press story that I don't buy. The people who have left, most of them are the people that usually leave at the end of one administration to the next. For example, the head of the National Intelligence Council changes with every administration because the administration wants somebody in that job that is their person. So I'm sorry, I don't buy it. It doesn't stand the historical test. People like this argument. It just isn't true. I have tremendous faith in Director Radcliffe and what he's doing at CIA.
On another topic, would you share with us how intelligence officers interact, if they do it, with diplomatic officers in a posting? Perhaps using Japan as an example, even like how many numbers are there? And of course, we know presidents often make political appointments to ambassador positions who may or may not have diplomatic experience. Could you just talk a little bit about that interaction?
Yeah, it's a complicated relationship with the Foreign Service and the CIA because often what we do complicates their lives, right? If we're caught doing something in a foreign country, they get the blowback. We just leave. We don't stick around. If we've had an operation compromised, we just get out of town. They have to clean up. So oftentimes they feel we're more trouble than we're worth. On the other hand, I will say that often State Department officers cover for us, make sure that nobody knows exactly who we are, give us things to do that affirm our cover. For example, if you are a consular officer or a political officer or an economic officer in your supposed day job, the ambassador needs to back you up, the DCM, everyone else. So it is a very close working relationship. We brief them in the embassy. The chief of station is constantly talking to the ambassador, letting him know what we're doing, letting him know what operations may be coming up. But I won't say it's not a relationship with its challenges, because what we do is dangerous and it can be embarrassing. We can cause embarrassment to the United States government, no question about it. If we do it badly, it's, one of the things we always say at the CIA is, what is the Washington Post test? In other words, if this appears on the front page of the Washington Post, how's it going to look? And then we have to weigh the risk and benefits of those kinds of operations.
First of all, thank you so much. This is so fascinating, and you're really giving us so much insight and historic and current perspective. And I'm curious if you can speak to some recent CIF history and some of the impact that it had.
I don't think we have time for that.
Well, I feel like, okay, so the CIA was wrapped with false intelligence leading to the Iraq War. I often had wondered whether it was more toward what you had said a few moments ago, the CIA perhaps being pushed to tell the president or high office holders what they wanted to hear. What has been the impact in the aftermath? Was there like a recovery time with the folks in the CIA and the culture? How did that impact the culture, and how did the folks inside?
Yeah, that's an excellent, really good question. I'll give you two examples. Iraq, WMD, but also 9/11. When we fail, we are devastated. We failed the American public on 9/11. The last presidential daily brief we wrote on that subject before 9/11 was in early August. You can actually read it. The Senate forced us to release it. And the title is, Bin Laden Wants to Strike in the United States. The problem was, and I use it in my courses as an example, it's terribly written. It should have been a warning piece, and it was so muddy and so full of qualifiers that I know that the president, while he was at the ranch in Texas, glossed over the piece because he said there's nothing new here. If that piece had been written right, there was information on there, for example, that the FBI had picked up about an attack on New York. There had been information in there about using airplanes in some way, shape. We have beaten ourselves black and blue over the years, over 9/11. On Iraq, WMD is a very complicated story, but let me tell you, many analysts did not agree with the assessment that was made. And many analysts feel the question the White House asked was the wrong question. The question they asked was, does Saddam Hussein have a weapons program? And of course the answer that was given was yes. If the question had been asked, how credible is the information that Saddam Hussein has a weapons program, it would have been a totally different answer. Because this was a very low confidence judgment. And just to give you just a slight bit more, the main information came from not an American agent, but an agent of the Germans. And this agent we had never met, but we took the information of the Germans and used it. Turned out this individual was a total fabricator of information. He was doing it all for money. Big mistake. And again, we've beaten ourselves up. We do, like the military does when there's a crash or something, we do after actions, lessons learned, try and make sure we won't do that again. By the way, the code name for that agent was Curveball. That should have given us a hint. Somehow it did. Okay.
Who in the United States government is responsible for ferreting out foreign spies? Is that a CIA responsibility, or does it fall on somebody else's plate?
Largely, it is to the FBI counterintelligence division to do that. We support their activities. If we pick up information on a spy in the United States as CIA, we will give it to the FBI. But remember, we have no law enforcement authority. We cannot arrest anybody. The FBI has to do the arresting. I'll tell you one quick story. One of my best friends in the agency was working in Beijing Station. A Chinese came to him and said, "You may not put this information in writing. You have to fly home and tell your senior officials. We have an agent in the CIA, and he's a Chinese American." My friend was a Chinese American, and his heart sank because he played cards with every Chinese American officer. So he knew it was one of his friends. He brings that back to Washington. We figure out who it is. The spy had been in place ever since the Korean War. His name was Larry Wu Tai-Chin. But again, we ferret out that information, but we always hand it over to law enforcement because that's their responsibility. And then, of course, FBI hands it to Department of Justice, who then prosecutes the case.
Thank you.
Sure.
As you were speaking, I thought back to a motion picture I saw years ago starring William Holden, The Counterfeit Traitor, which leads me to the question, if you were today an admitted spy and your wife was a spy, did you each know each of you were spies?
We did know that. I've been trying to remember your pseudo, by the way, and I can't remember yours, but that's okay. Well, I know you do, but what we couldn't do often is tell each other what we were doing because we worked in different, what we call bigoted compartments in the agency. So I might be working on one spy case, she might be working on a totally different spy case. And so we shared some information and a lot of information, but when it comes to very sensitive operations, I mean, I was involved in operations that I'll never tell her about. She was involved in some that she can never tell me about.
Thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful 4th of July. Thanks for spending